we do serve an affluent subsection of our customers. And, these are people who aren't always accustomed to being told no. But this wasn't something that they could pay their way out of.
Welcome to Modern Gov Matters. I'm Sarah Lloyd, and this show is all about honest conversations with local government communicators about what's actually working, what's not, and the stuff that keeps you up at night. Modern Gov Matters is presented by Civol, powered by Social News Desk. Today I'm talking with Stephen Baird, a public affairs associate at Las Virgenes Municipal Water District in Southern California. And Stephen's team has dealt with some of the toughest communications challenges you can imagine, telling wealthy homeowners that you're literally restricting their water flow because they won't stop watering their lawns during a historic drought. He won Capio's Crisis Communicator of the Year award for that work. So today we're talking about the hard stuff: enforcement, being the messenger when nobody wants to hear the message, and how you communicate when you have to be the bad guy in somebody else's story. So Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be able to kind of share the Las Virgenes story.
Yeah, of course. So before we get into the crisis stuff, I do want to hear your origin story because you have a really interesting background: photography, graphic design. You ran a pool service business, and somehow you ended up as a communicator for a water district. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so it is. It's a circuitous way that got me to public affairs at Las Virgenes. I always wanted to be a writer, really loved journalism. Coming out of college when I did, probably the beginning of the end for print publications as we knew it. Journalism was changing, the internet and that stuff. But I always had this love for photography. And through the water ski team at Sac State, I was able to meet Phil Vassar. He had the photo contracts for all the major Northern California thoroughbred horse racing. And his son was on the water ski team with me, so I knew him. And when an opportunity arose for me to go work for him, I was really able to kind of like pursue professional photography. But it was a bit of a hustle, and I needed, what's not a hustle is the bills. They come every month. So I did. My best friend had a pool cleaning business, and I kind of was doing pool cleaning and shooting as much as I could. And so I kind of focused on that. And through the pool business, I got really involved in sustainability, right? So I got certified through Southern California Edison and Los Angeles DWP to do some high efficiency installs. And all that leads me to then I had a taste of all this, and the opportunity came to kind of come to Las Virgenes. And so I started here as a, field operations tech, and that's reading meters and digging out meter boxes and stuff. And I loved it. I still needed some additional income to make up for the pool business. And so I started working overtime with the public affairs staff. Come to find out that they're very much into photography. I'm a good photographer. So I started working every event I could. I would work with them. I was the mascot, Little Drop, wearing the suit. I would go out to events, take photos. For me, it was an opportunity because one of my predecessors decided it was time for her to retire. And I was able to kind of move into the public affairs role, which I've been here since 2019. I manage and administer most of our digital outreach as well as do graphic design. And then, of course, the photo and the video stuff.
Yeah, that's great that you have such a creative outlet still, because you have this creative background, and it's so great that you get to still flex those muscles in your current role. So you're doing everything now from Instagram to podcast to crisis response. But let's talk a little bit about 2022 and the drought. Can you walk me through what your team was facing and what made that drought response different from anything you've done before?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Coming out of COVID in 2020 and then all of a sudden, we started seeing lack of rain. And so it was kind of like a slow motion car wreck because we could see that we weren't getting the rain. And so we started ramping up early. I think recognizing that we needed to amplify the seriousness of the situation to our customers. So we started that, and then we just kind of waited until eventually we did come under some really draconian water use restrictions. We basically were restricted about 75% of the total water coming into the district. So that was really difficult. And then our district, we are in the northwest corner of Los Angeles County. It's a bedroom community, suburban, a lot of single family homes, people with yards. And they were being asked to go to 1 day a week watering. One of the interesting things about our service area is we do serve an affluent subsection of our customers. And these are people who aren't always accustomed to being told no. But this wasn't something that they could pay their way out of,
Right.
right? And so we really stepped up our awareness messaging to try to bring the problem to the forefront of everybody's attention. And then we transition to what the enforcement is going to be. And so our water resource and our crew came up with a flow restrictor, which is basically a small disc with a very small hole that we would put in a person's water system, and that would basically allow them to do everything they needed to do indoor, but they couldn't water their lawn. And so that was kind of the crux, right? What is our communications problem? Our communications problem is one, bringing the drought to the forefront. We've been hearing about drought for years and years and years, but this was like a real serious drought. Our second communication problem was making sure everybody understood what the change in compliance meant for them. When could they water? What days? What addresses? What should they water? How do they keep their trees alive? All of that became, part of the subject matter that we were trying to convey. And then thirdly, if you don't comply, these are the steps that's going to get you to be flow restricted. And so it was really a multifaceted communications strategy and plan. One of the reasons we were so successful is we were really able to lean into this kind of equity aspect of it. That just because you have money doesn't mean you get a green grass. And the bottom line is you're either going to reduce your water waste by making the cuts yourself and having a brown lawn on your own accord, or you were going to have a brown lawn because we were going to have to restrict it.
So, one thing I want to know, how do you prepare yourself to be the face of unpopular decisions? Because you were actually on camera explaining why homes were getting flow restrictors. And that is got to be mentally really hard. So, how do you handle that?
My job was to explain what the decision was, how we came to it, and how does it impact customers. And I think the other part that really helped is because this was a regional emergency, I was under the same restrictions at my home in a neighboring community, right? So it wasn't like it was do as I say, not as I do. It was we're all in this together. We need to get through this and then prepare ourselves for the future after this. I think that lessened the blow. I think one of the more difficult things too is, as a government agency, you're going to get the questions like, why weren't you ready for this? And as I think any public agency or utility, we're dealing with new challenges, right? The Department of Water Resources never said it would get that bad. It was never supposed to be like this. But the reality has changed. And so that was a tough question to deal with. And really what we leaned into was as we move out of this, we are going to show you what we're doing to be ready for the next time. When you talk about crisis, there's the recovery aspect of crisis communications. And I would say that our we have continued the recovery communications because it's a long-term behavioral change we're looking for. I think the scale of it was also surprising. I think by the time we ended up, all the collateral we had to do, all of the advertisements, all of the website updates, all the social media updates, the comments, all of that stuff. But I'm really proud of being part of the team that was able to kind of rise to that occasion.
Yeah. And have you found that that folks' behavior has changed overall, or did people kind of go back to watering their lawns right away as soon as they were able to?
You've seen lasting conservation. The numbers have bounced back a little bit.
Mhm.
And a lot of that, we've had an unseasonably warm start to this year. And if people are hot, they think their lawn is hot and they're going to water it. But overall, if you were to look from a macro level, we are still seeing 20, 25%, 30% on a month to month basis of water savings. We were able to drive a lot of our customers to some of the beneficial programs and rebate programs we have. And so when I look and see that we've been able to drive 250 plus people who have then replaced their lawn or replaced or upgraded their irrigation system to be more efficient, that's kind of how I can see the success.
So, can you tell me maybe what didn't work and what you might do differently if you had to do this again tomorrow?
I think we would lean more heavily into person to person communications and using our digital channels to promote that engagement. One of the things we did was we had a town hall. We had 1,500 people show up. It lasted 5 hours. Our general manager stayed on and answered every person's questions. And by the end, the questions were getting pretty weird. So, but we did, right? We were in it for the customers, but we could also go to each individual of our customer cities, make presentations, have open town halls, and really be able to kind of help customers on a personal basis.
Hmm.
I think also that just having more channels that we own versus relying on trying to run paid ads on social or all those things. Even in 2022, the algorithmic feeds were different. The just how social media companies operated was different. Obviously, Twitter is no longer Twitter, it's X. And that was, a huge change from kind of emergency communications in the past. So definitely, I think prioritizing, information sharing from our website through our email, through channels we own, I think would be a much higher priority now. And then kind of use our social media and paper advertisements and things like that kind of as general awareness. But I think for us, a personal connection and really prioritizing the communications channels we own would be a big difference.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. I know we've been talking a lot about crisis communication and the really hard stuff, but you also produced an entire podcast for the Pure Water Project. So for someone listening who's being asked to just start a podcast with no budget, no team, what would be your advice?
Do it.
Do
You
it.
can do it with no budget and no team. So, what I would say is the benefits of the podcast are if you are struggling to build content, a podcast episode can give you a bunch of pieces of content, right? So, for my podcast, for the Pure Full Circle podcast, I'm looking to get 8 clips and a full length out of every episode we do. So that's one thing, because if you have small resources, you can you put 30 minutes of your time interviewing somebody and getting them to tell their story, and now you have a week's worth of content on that. That was a huge help. I think the other piece of advice I would give, like, so if you go look, which everybody should, Full Circle Podcast, it's rpureh2o.com/ full circle pod. It's very much the traditional long form, two people having a conversation at a table format, but you don't have to do that format. And that's what's so great about podcasting is, depending on your agency or what your talent and your people are, you could do something as cool as just taking your cell phone, jumping into your public works manager's truck, asking him 5 questions about a project, and then going out to the project. Worst case scenario is you only get 3 good clips that you can use, or you go through 5 episodes and it may not be the right channel or the right, you know, not be the right initiative for your particular agency. I have been doing a podcast on professional wrestling since 2019,
Wow.
and one of my best friends is from high school, and I started it, and we started it just with the cell phone on the counter and talking. And so you can go as cheap as you want, but I just feel that it's such a unique platform and gives you so many opportunities to have great discussions and tell great stories, that in the end, if you are trying to build content for your channels, it's such a good resource. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So before we wrap up, I just want to do a quick lightning round, just three
Yes.
questions about your area. So, first of all, what's your favorite local spot in your service area? It could be a restaurant, a park, a hiking trail, whatever.
Okay, so in our service area, my favorite spot is obviously our reservoir because it's just spectacularly beautiful, but not our reservoir. I would say I really love a Thai restaurant up the street on Las Virgenes Road called Green Basil Thai. I basically eat there once a week. So it's fantastic. One of the best parts about our service area is we cover a huge amount is protected by the Santa Monica Mountains.
Hmm.
And so there is a really well-known trail around here called the Backbone Trail that basically traverses the mountain range between above Malibu. And so you get up on there and you're hiking, and you can see Catalina, the Channel Islands, the ocean. So it's just visually spectacular. And I love the trails in the area are super awesome. And then I definitely do want to give a shout out. One of my hobbies is delicious craft beer, and we have a really good local brewery called 14 Cannons that, if I'm not eating Thai, that is a place that I like to go. So those are probably my three tops.
So, what would you say is the most underrated part of your community that people should know about?
I think our community gets painted with a broad brush, like I mentioned before about, oh, it's the reality TV show, it's all this, but our community is mostly made up of people who really they moved out here because they wanted to get out of the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles proper, and they love the natural beauty around here. And so what we have this really strong coalition of people who are very environmentally literate and conscientious. And so it just makes it a really awesome place to do the work that I do in water, right? Because yes, we did have people who didn't want to stop watering their lawn, but we also had many people who have been early adopters of drought tolerance, and they are, very much understanding of the greater ecosystem. Our constituents are very much like they're hiking, they're biking, they're riding their road bikes. They're out and about in the community and especially out in the natural beauty.
Now, if your area had a theme song, what would it be?
I would say walking on sunshine because I feel that when you get out in the community and people are either at the community events, they're coming out to the creek cleanup or all that stuff, there really is a sense of optimism about where we live and a joy about being outside and being in the area. And when I think about the song Walking on Sunshine, that's kind of what I think about, just being out,
Yeah.
enjoying where you are with walking on sunshine. Yeah. So I think that would be a good one. Agora Hills is a city that we serve, and they have a whole thing like Agora Hills. It's the good life, and I think that kind of encapsulate Walking on Sunshine encapsulates that.
So, my final question, if someone's listening right now and they know that they have a tough enforcement message coming, like water restrictions, rate increases, some kind of unpopular policy, and they're really dreading it, what's the one piece of advice that you'd give them?
Pull the Band-Aid off and start earlier. I wish we would have had the opportunity to start in on the drought messaging earlier. Obviously, coming out of COVID, it was a little bit different. Definitely, we just did a rate study and we started almost a whole year in advance. Just, communications is it's like building a building. You got to start with your foundation, right? And so the earlier you can start and get that done and start laying the groundwork for the difficult conversations, the better off you're going to be. We've been really lucky because I think a lot more customers know they should pay attention. So since we've come out of the drought, that's actually been one of the really interesting things is our email list is so strong. It's like consistently 68% open rate,
Wow.
uh, because I think they're all just afraid that they're going to miss out on when we're going to
Something
do the flow
important.
restrictors again. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So that's like, if you know what's going to happen, right? Compliance and like rate studies, give yourself the longest runway possible and keep receipts because my favorite thing is, well, I didn't know about it. It's like we did 4 public information sessions. I sent you an email. You says you opened the email on this day at this time. So, but also, it's people are busy. And so the earlier you start, the more opportunities you have to really help shape opinion, sentiment, and behavior.
Where can people follow your work or connect with you later on?
Yeah, definitely. So LinkedIn is definitely a place to message me. If you want to follow my professional work, all of the LVMWD channels, you can see kind of my photos, videos, kind of where my perspective lies in utilizing some of these channels. For those of you in California, if you aren't already, I would highly suggest getting involved with CAPIO, the California Association of Public Information Officers. I serve on their board as vice president of awards, but us, I'm just all the events and all the stuff, the networking and you know the support you get, like the people I was able to call when feeling really bad about myself because people are mad at me online for shutting down their water.
Hmm.
That's invaluable, right?
Yeah.
And so I would highly recommend that. PRSA is also very good here in Southern California. So those are where I would, and definitely if anybody's listening and interested in our story or things I've done, please reach out. Uh, I love to share what we've done and help in any way I can.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love so much about the government comms community is everyone's got each other's back all the time. If one person's going through something hard, there's 10 more people behind them willing to prop them up while they're going through the really hard things.
Things I think, to wrap up as take moving forward, things that I've really learned is like Nowadays, most emergencies are going to be regional, and they're going to be beyond a single agency's
Hmm.
ability to communicate. So, having that network of people who have your back, not only for the emergencies, but also when you do something great and have people applaud you, it's amazing. And our work is hard. Some people are never happy with us. There's always someone who's going to tell us what we could have done better, or why it was wrong, or why we should have made this font different, or whatever it may be. And so having that network of professionals who have your back in good times and are there to applaud your successes, I just think is the best.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Stephen, thank you so much for being honest about the hard parts about this work. I think a lot of people need to hear this. And for everyone listening, if you're doing crisis communications, enforcement messaging, or just trying to survive in local government comms, you are not alone. And that's what this show is all about. Modern Gov Matters is presented by Civol, powered by Social News Desk. And if you found this episode helpful or interesting, please share it. I'm Sarah Lloyd, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.